Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour to close today's debate. I think the kind of debate that justifies why the public go to the ballot box to put us here. We've had 63 collegiate, wise and passionate speeches today, all the way through from the member for Newbury, who talked about farmers displaced by salination of their lands, all the way through to the honourable member for Norwich, who gave us my favourite comment of the day, where he said, if you are drowning, you don't ask, ooh, what's politically possible? You do what you need to do to survive. We also heard the maiden speech from the honourable member for Newport West, and I have to say that Newport will be proud of her tonight, as will her predecessor, who I'm sure is smiling down today. We also heard from the Right Honourable Member for Doncaster North, who was applauded right across the House for his groundbreaking work on climate change, but he also said that every political issue we consider must deal with climate change. And in that vein, I wanted to pay tribute to many of my colleagues who haven't had the opportunity to speak today, who have been leading the charge on climate change, not least the Honourable Member for Workington, Brent North and Southampton Test, who are sat behind me today. Now, the great Salford poet and songwriter Ewan MacColl once wrote in a song about hiking on the moors, I may be a wage slave on Monday, but I'm a free man on Sunday. Now, whether or not you like his music or his politics, I think there are three things we can take from that, which almost everyone in this House would agree on. Firstly, the environment is not something separate from ourselves, something out there. It's part of our freedom. When we talk about the environment, we're talking about the places that mean the most to us, about our food, about the air we breathe, literally the air we breathe. And 70% of the world's oxygen is produced by marine life, life that is threatened by ocean warming and acidification caused by carbon put into the atmosphere. Secondly, climate change and the environment are not luxury concerns. It's working people that benefit most when our public spaces flourish, urban or rural, and it's the poorest, both at home and internationally, who will be hit first and worst by the climate emergency. And it's the working people, as we've heard today, who have the most to gain from a green industrial revolution that could transform our economy, creating hundreds of thousands of good jobs. And we on this side estimate that retrofitting the UK's housing stock could create 160,000 jobs alone right across the UK. Offshore wind by 2030, 120,000 jobs, largely in coastal towns and regions that have struggled for decades. And thirdly, our climate and our environment are in deep trouble. You don't have to look far to see how climate change is already a disaster for many across the world, from the cyclone that's recently struck Mozambique to protracted droughts in East Africa. And if we continue on our current path, we face unimaginable losses for every member's constituency in this House, and unimaginable losses for people and communities across the world. But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be this way. We're running out of time, but there is still time. So let's use that time well and start today by declaring a climate emergency. But very briefly, what does that mean? Well, I think the motion has set out some guidance for this. It means reducing our greenhouse gas emissions as rapidly as possible and down to net zero before 2050, with short-term targets for the green energy transition and sustainable modes of transport. It means properly funding environmental protection domestically and legislating to reduce waste, moving towards a zero-waste economy. It means capturing the green jobs of the future and mitigating the impact of transitioning to a low-carbon economy on workers in regions. And it means bringing wildlife and biodiversity back to levels that I'm too young to remember. But as we know from David Attenborough, no one is too young or old to be captivated by. And perhaps more than anything, declaring an emergency means that we will devote the time and the resources to the problem that are commensurate with the scale of the problems. So we need action commensurate with the scale of the problem, Mr. Speaker. And this is where we start today, in declaring a climate and environment emergency. This motion gives us a basis on which to act, and that is why I commend this motion to the House.